Hi, I'm Ron with Cruising This Old Boat, and today I'm going to show you how to adjust the valves on your Ford Lehman 135. The first thing you have to do is remove the valve cover so you can access the valves. Now, unless you have a spare gasket, make sure to be very careful not to damage your existing gasket. You're going to have to turn your crankshaft at various times while you're doing this procedure. So the first thing you want to do before you turn your crankshaft is make sure you disengage the stop solenoid so that it doesn't accidentally fire up on you. One warning I want to give before I do too much work here is sometimes I know people use videos of one particular type of equipment to extrapolate what to do in another type of equipment. In this case, I'm working on a Ford Lehman 135, and so you might think, well, I can just do a 120 exactly the same way, but it's not. First of all, the gaps are different, but also there's a requirement on, I believe on the 120s, but I know on certain engines that anytime you adjust the valve clearances, you have to also adjust the head bolts. Don't have to do that on a 135, so I'm not going to be doing it. Also, some engines require you to do this with the engine warm. Again, on a 135, we don't have to, but check your engine, the specs on your engine, and see if it needs the engine to be warm to do this procedure. In order to properly adjust the valve clearance on your engine, you're going to need a manual. It tells you which valve to open to adjust a corresponding other valve. So make sure you have your manual handy. If you don't have a manual, you can get this information online. You're going to need a fairly large tool to turn the crankshaft. This was handiest for me, but you can also use a breaker bar with a socket on it. Put the wrench on the crankshaft and turn it in a clockwise position if you're looking at the engine from the front. You're going to adjust the crankshaft until valves 1 and 4 are in the completely open position. With valves 1 and 4 in the open position, you're going to adjust the clearance on valves 9 and 12. To check the gap, you want to insert your feeler gauge between the rocker arm and the valve, and it should go in, but with some resistance. This is way too much of a gap. You can see how easily I can slide it in and out. So that's definitely too much of a gap. We're going to need to adjust that. So you want to adjust the valve clearance adjusting screw until there's just slight resistance on your feeler gauge. All right, you can see that I can get it in and out now, but there's resistance. So I have to kind of pull on it to get it out. That's where you want it. All right, that one's good. Once you have those two valves adjusted properly, then you're going to turn your crankshaft to the next set, which is 8 and 10 open. With 8 and 10 open, you're going to adjust valves 3 and 5. 3 is too loose. And then you just keep repeating that for each series listed in your manual. Now, I want to point out that it doesn't take very much adjustment at all to change these quite a bit, because you're working with such a small gap. So don't get muscly on it and go turning it a lot. It doesn't take much. Once you've adjusted all of the valves, then replace the valve cover. Now remember, when you go to tighten down the valve cover, do not over tighten it. If you do, you warp the valve cover and the gasket won't seal. So hand tighten it. Don't try to be a He-Man and muscle it in. It's better to under tighten it than over tighten it. You're going to come back after you run the engine a little bit anyway and double check all these bolts or screws, whatever you have on your engine. Check for oil leaks. So I always come back after I've opened them for any reason. I'm going to come back 2, 3, 4 times, giving it a day or two in between each time, so that it can move around, it can loosen up, it can do whatever it needs to do, and I just keep tightening down a little bit each time until they don't tighten anymore and don't loosen anymore. Now, after you make sure that your stop solenoid has been released, whatever you put in there to jam it up, take that out, and we're going to fire the engine up and see how she does. Thanks for watching.